Welcome to another episode of Croc Talk. I am your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back, Eric Crocker. And on today's episode, we are talking about Jevon Holland, Hollywood Vaughn, defensive back out of Oregon. Or I almost call him a safety, but as we get into the film, you'll see he does a lot more than just play the safety position. So if you guys want to see this video and much, much more, make sure you guys subscribe to the Patreon account, patreon.com/croctalk. All right, so let's get into Jevon Holland, the ball hawking defensive back. On Twitter, I've been getting a lot of questions about, hey, is Jevon Holland, is he a nickel? Is he a safety? And I think I don't want to draw the comparison, but just going off of film and kind of how he played, it's a lot like Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I think with Minkah, a lot of people had those same type of questions. Is he a safety? Is he a nickel? How high do you draft a nickel guy? And I'm like, man, these guys are kind of wherever you want to put them. And I think Holland kind of fits in that. Now, I do think I see more of an ideal role for Holland, and we'll get into that. But let's just talk about some of the traits that I see right away. So the way I break down these videos, I go through, I make a ton of cut-ups, and then I label each cut-up. And then I might have like a theme for a label. So a lot of times if they are like a good tackler or whatever, a lot of times I'll put willing tackler. Because there are a lot of people that think like you just have to be like a big hitter to be, this great tackler and whatnot. And my thing, and you might miss some tackles or whatever, but the one thing I want to see first and foremost is, are you a willing tackler? So I started to write willing tackler on his. Then I noticed he is much more than a willing tackler. All right. This dude goes and gets it. He goes out of his way to make tackles. He'll disengage from blockers, go in, he'll slice in. People might kind of get him mixed up with being like a box safety. I don't think he's a quote unquote box safety. Definitely plays more coverage than your typical in terms of being a box safety. But playing around the line of scrimmage, not scared to, get in the mix of things, dive in there, taking out guys, coming down from, distance. Open field tackles are extremely difficult. I know people see guys miss open field tackles and they're like, oh, he's a terrible tackler. Man, that stuff is hard. But he excelled at it. I thought that was like a big time strength of his, just being able to, no matter how much space is between him and the guy, the ball carrier, he was able to come down and make tackles from whatever distance. And guys, they didn't have much what we call leak yardage. I got that term from Robert Saleh, New York Jets head coach. I almost called him 49ers defensive coordinator, but Robert Saleh used that, leak yardage. And that's when, a guy makes contact, does he still fall forward and whatnot. Like these guys, when he was tackling, there was not much leak yardage, but I think the thing that stood out to me more than anything, like obviously a very willing tackler, very aggressive at the tackle point and everything, but just his willingness to go out of his way to make a tackle, and that showed up time and time again. So that tells me a lot about this dude's mindset and what type of football. He's a good football player, and I think that's one of the highest compliments that you can pay to a guy coming out. All right, so first, real quick, let's talk about just some of the things I kind of see right away, right? I thought, putting on the Auburn game, there were a couple clips where I'm like, boom, clean feet. Really like to see that, like just in and out of his break, real nice, real quick, no wasted steps. That was really good. And then in a couple other games I watched, I saw, hey, nice fluid movements here, right? Being able to kind of flip his hips or turn and run with the guy. And, one of them was like a speed turn, and he was able to get right back on that upfield shoulder. So seeing those things, and me, I like to really kind of see what type of movement skills this guy has. I thought he was a fluid mover, so that was a plus. You also want to know, where's his mind at? And I was watching the Arizona game, and there were a few plays that jumped out to me there, and it kind of happened simultaneously. There was one play where he kind of shuffled out a little bit or opened up. He opened up just a little too much, gave up the inside, and there was a catch right there. And then the next 3 reps, I watched him play pretty much the same guy, and he just changed up his technique a little bit, where he started to squat a little bit more, didn't open up, stayed more square, got hands on, washed the guy down. And very simple, but it was really good for me to see kind of that in-game adjustment. I really like to see that. Overall, I thought he was a good coverage guy. Now, do I want to leave him in coverage, man coverage all the time? I think it kind of depends on what type of receiver he's going against. But for the most part, we talked about those fluid movements. I thought that allowed him to really compete with guys and be a solid, consistent cover guy. Now, is he going to be just, if he has to play like the nickel in the NFL, will he be like this shutdown, lockdown nickel guy? I wouldn't say that. but I know if he's a safety and maybe in a 2-high system or a cover 4 system where he has to kind of, match with guys and be able to, guard them in space, turn and run with them. I think he does that very well. That was something that kind of really jumped out consistently. For the most part, good feet, good understanding of, his leverage for the most part. Again, I thought his ability to cover different size of guys was solid. Okay, it was solid. I can pick out plays, and I did show some that were a little bit more up and down, but for the most part of what kind of jumped out consistently, they played a lot where they asked a lot of him to guard guys in space. Like that's tough, no matter who you are. You could be Jalen Ramsey playing out in space, having to man guys up when they have, 7 yards of space already created, 8 yards of space already created. That's a difficult task to ask, especially of somebody who's a safety. So, I thought he handled that very well. I thought he got his hands on a good amount of balls. Obviously, Auburn, he had a nice interception there. What game was it? Washington State, maybe, where he had to pick 6. It's going to be in these clips, all right? But where he was able to, close really quick, so show nice, good acceleration, undercut the route, catch the interception, and then do the rest by taking it to the house. There were a lot of things that jumped out to me about, just who he is and what type of versatility he has. Like, I'm really big on right now, more than any other time in the NFL, safeties have to be able to cover. Now, I'm not saying they got to be some shutdown, lockdown guys, but you don't want a safety out there that's going to just really be a liability in coverage. And I thought for the most part, he wasn't a liability. I thought he covered very well. I thought he was consistent with it. Again, depending on the type of receiver, but more times than not, I thought he showed up and did a really good job understanding leverage, understanding, how to really adjust when something didn't go his way the rep before. I really liked what I saw from him from a coverage standpoint. When you look at him and it's like, hey, he's a safety, right? And I didn't see a whole lot of just pure safety alignments, like, just like a 2-high safety or single high. There were times where I saw him roll to it a little bit here and there, but I kind of wanted to just show a few clips of some where I saw him kind of bail out to either a 2-high and just how he kind of played. I thought, a couple of these he did a really good job of having clean feet, but obviously we see him get beat deep against Auburn. So, I think for the most part, with that, I wouldn't worry too much about the whole Auburn play. Again, that's another play where he is out there. Essentially, he's on an island with a guy that has a head start in a lot of space. So that they asked a lot of him, and I thought, like, plays like that, that's extremely difficult to cover and to ask of a guy to do in space like that. So they put a lot on him from a coverage standpoint and just a responsibility standpoint in general. Played a ton in space, but I thought from a 2-high, he looked good getting to his spots. Definitely the Auburn game, he got beat deep. So I spoke about, how they asked a lot of him, and I thought, it definitely jumped out sometimes, depending on the type of receiver that he's guarding. Like, he isn't the most sudden or twitched up defensive back, and that's probably why he plays more safety. So, they asked somebody kind of knowing that these things might pose a challenge to him to really guard some of these smaller, quicker guys in space, and you see him kind of sometimes get turned around or, not be able to match the smaller guys or quicker guys twitchiness or suddenness or quickness in space. Again, that's a lot to ask of a safety, but they did put down their shoulders, and I showed plenty of clips where it did work. Here are some where you can kind of just see some of the challenges that he might run into, especially at the NFL level, where guys are even more nuanced route runners. So you kind of see these clips where some maybe his foot he didn't get his feet in the ground and close right now, or it kind of gets turned around, or getting going upfield a little bit too much, maybe doesn't trust his speed and whatnot. Like, those are things that it kind of jumped out a little bit depending on the receivers. Again, in some of these clips you're going to see from Arizona State where, I thought not just him, I thought the Oregon's secondary in 2019 struggled overall against Arizona State. And those kind of, Brandon Ayuk, who, he was a first-round draft pick, so I'm not going to knock him for getting turned around by Brandon Ayuk in space, Ayuk lining up in the slot. That is a tough ask of your safety to be able to cover him in space, no help. But overall, it just kind of shows me what he is and what he isn't. And what he is, I think he's a terrific safety who can cover. I'm not sure if he's a pure nickel guy that would ask to do these things time and time again. So, I like a lot of what I saw from him in coverage. I just wouldn't leave him just, hey, you're a pure nickel. I would ask him to do a little bit more safety things at the next level. I think all in all, when I watch him again, I said, I gave him the highest compliment I feel like I can give, which saying he is a really good football player. Saw him down low in the box. Not scared to get dirty, not scared to get nasty in there, gets his hands on guys, disengage blocks, goes in, makes tackles. Saw plenty of instances where he was really good in coverage, right? I think he can guard, especially you put a bigger guy in front of him. I wouldn't have any issues lining him up there and having him guard big receivers. I wouldn't necessarily just make him a pure nickel guy, because then you're going to be matched up against, especially some of these smaller, quicker route running receivers in the NFL. And I think that can pose a big time challenge for him that might not go in his favor. But if you have to line him up here and there sometimes, I wouldn't mind that, depending on the matchup. Especially if it's a bigger receiver and you want him to say, hey, you go guard this guy in space and we're going to run our defense around that. I think he can do that well against some of these big slots who are kind of, really coming into the NFL. Won't have any issues with that. I would like to see how, he transfers over into being more of maybe a 2 high safety or a single high safety. Again, in the games I saw, which I watched most of 2019, I didn't see a whole lot of single high reps. I saw a couple where he was just kind of out there, but nothing too noteworthy or anything like that. Saw some 2 high reps, but not a whole lot. So, some of that is projection, but I don't think he'll have any issues playing in either a 2 high or a single high. And I really feel like if he is in a single high scheme, I feel like he can play both. He can play both. I think he can play single high. I think he can play in the box. And I think that's going to take me over to who I think his pro player comp is. All right, so it's pro player comp. And, I don't think he's as big as this guy, but just from a skill set standpoint and kind of how he plays and things I saw from this guy and what I think, he can do, Jaquiski Tartt, safety for the 49ers. Now, I think most people will look at Tartt and they'll say, oh, he's a box safety, he's a strong safety. Nah, I think Tartt plays well at single high. I definitely can play in the box. I think when you look at how they tackle and close, it's tremendous, and I like that from both guys. I think Tartt in coverage is solid. Yeah, I wouldn't match him up against a smaller, quicker receiver or anything like that. But, when you start talking about guarding, tight ends and, having to guard different type of bigger bodies in space, I think Tartt is fine there. Again, ideally, with Tartt, you want to have him be more of a 2 high guy or a single high guy. He can do those things, come down in the box, terrific tackler, play there. So, yeah, that's a high compliment for Jevon Holland, for me just thinking that he's that caliber of player, because I think that Jaquiski Tartt, who has been a good safety in the NFL for a while now, I think that's a pretty good comp for him. So that's going to do it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys liked all the clips and cut ups and things like that. Again, pro player comp, I like Jaquiski Tartt. I think their skill sets match up, different sizes. I think Jaquiski Tartt's a big dude, like 6'2", 225 or whatever he was, ran very well, was a 2nd round pick. If you ask me where Jevon Holland would go, I think he'd probably go 2nd round, more so because I think that, the safety position is a bit undervalued a little bit, but somebody might see his coverage skills and his versatility and say, hey, he's a 1st round guy. Wouldn't be surprised about that at all right? But for more breakdowns like this and much, much more, make sure you guys subscribe, patreon.com/croctalk, so you can get this and much more. See y'all next time.